I am Jeff Ado. This is Lunacy, where we discern the sacred from the where we discern the sacred from the insane and admit that whether we like it or not, we are all profoundly affected by the cycles of the moon. That was a pretty good howl. That was kind of a growl howl.
It was a growl howl.
Yeah. It was. I like that though.
I was tracking to when you were going to hit, and I hit a little late. So
no, it's good. I thought it was good. I was scared. Yeah, I think everybody else out there was scared too, which is good. That's what you want from a wolf, I
think the beard helps.
It does. Yeah, you do. I feel like you're probably concealing an axe, behind your back or something.
Maybe I do have an axe around the wall.
Of course you do. Why wouldn't you?
Two of them.
Two of them. That's great. All right, good. I'll let you know when I'm ready to go to battle, and we'll take them out. Get in our Viking ship, and I'll have my long hair and my sword, and it'll be fun, man. I'm into this whole fantasy right now.
Love it.
Let's do it.
I love it.
Lunacy is a luminary podcast. My luminary guest today is Jedi Master Joshua Wenner. He is a super coach. He's a really great guy. He's all about integrity, empowering men and women. After losing countless friends, his brother, and even his business, Joshua turned toward the one thing he had long been trained to shut off: his emotions. What followed was a journey of profound transformation, one that led to his creation of emotional resilience training, his work with veterans and first responders, and his exploration of how grief can become a gateway to wholeness. Ladies and gentlemen, Joshua Wenner. All right.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
times.
You. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show. It's great. You talk a lot about grief. You talk a lot about the nervous system and how to regulate that sucker, and all of that I'm profoundly interested in, and my listeners are also very profoundly interested in. It's so hard to do that, so I'm excited to get into that. The first thing I want to talk to you about, because I've been getting complaints from people. By the way, I'm just coming back from a long break. Everybody, I know this. Okay, it's been like almost a month. I put on a giant concert, which we're going to talk about later, at a huge theater here in Grass Valley, the Center for the Arts. And then we went on vacation to visit some family in Switzerland. Yeah, in Switzerland. Yeah. So we were on vacation. Yeah. We are back now. Yeah. So now I'm back and ready to go. But one of the complaints that I've gotten, or suggestions, I should say, from listeners is there's not really enough talk about the moon, dude. It's called Lunacy. Why are you not addressing the moon? So I want to talk a little bit about the moon. So Josh, can you tell me a little bit, like, what's your experience with the moon? Are you a lunatic? What do you got to say about moon things?
The first thing that comes to mind is, I'll actually use a metaphor, not just the moon, but the sun and the moon. And the metaphor I use a lot of time around the nervous system. And, we have the sun coming up, and then the sun goes down and the moon comes out. And so how are we different based on the sun and the moon? If you think about it, when the moon comes out, sometimes it can get a little chilly depending on where you're at. If the moon is at a quarter, you can't see as well, so you may need a flashlight. So the point of it is there's different things you need versus when the sun's out versus when the moon's out. And this is just continually happening, right? It's continually showing up. And I find it's the same thing with the nervous system. So often we want to look for the thing that triggered us. So if we could fix the thing, we can get better. And I find around the nervous system, a lot of it's just becoming aware when the sun's out or when the moon's out, and how we need to show up differently based on each one. And so that's what I use this metaphor quite a bit with, is that we're going to continually move through contraction, expansion. And the contraction oftentimes feels like the dark, or feels like when the moon is getting smaller. And expansion often feels like when the sun comes out and we can move really quickly. And if we can more move into how we accept the cycles of the sun and the moon with our nervous system, we can start to accept the contractions and expansions and have a lot more grace and a lot less being stuck in the head and resisting going into the dark. We can just go, to be expected. It's been sunny. Now the moon's out. And I have to use different tools based on what's showing up. So that's the first thing that came to mind when you mentioned it.
That's great. I love that. I'm glad I prepped you. I told him I was going to ask him about the moon, you guys, in advance, because I felt like that was a courteous thing to do. I didn't tell him about anything else. That was it. But that's a really thoughtful, great response, and it totally relates to the work you're doing. I was going to mention something about the moon for myself, which is, so I I'm obsessed with the moon. I love the moon. I love it when it's a full moon. I do actually howl at the moon. I do generally feel at my most powerful when the moon is full, whether that's because I am creating that in my own head. But really, I don't think so. I really think so often it happens that I'm like, wow, I'm feeling really alive and light and like awake right now. And then I look outside and I'm like, oh, the moon's full. Go. Let's go. This last full moon, which was a couple of days ago,
Mm-hmm.
um, my wife and I got in a huge fight, and it was over some really dumb thing, which I think
Usually happens.
most of the fights we get into are terrible. I mean, they're over stupid things. But it was like deep. It was like a big conflict, and we were like, okay, we need to get therapy. This is serious. And we were I went into some grieving, which we could talk about too. I did. I'm not I like crying. I think it's super good for you. And so whenever I think about crying or start to cry, I like really create it. I try to create a space as much as possible for me to release that emotion, because I think it's super valuable. So I did a little bit of that, and then my wife went to yoga, as she's prone to do, and the lady who's teaching the yoga class says, "Well, thank God that moon's over. It was in Aries, which is all about conflict." And I was like, "The astrologers win again," uh, which they do anyway. So that's my most recent experience with the full moon. That's I feel like we've covered our moon talk, and I appreciate you being a fellow lunatic on the program. And really, like, I think what you're pointing to with your initial answer is, that there are so many phases that we go through in our nervous system, and we don't, we just kind of have to accept where we're at instead of like battling against. And, from what little I know of your story, like thinking I have to be in top peak performance right now all the time, which is such a hot thing, especially for those of us with genitals, or sorry, penises, I should say. Now I said it, testicles. All right. I'm going to say the whole thing, men. Seems very important to us to be put peak performance all the time. But, there's times when, no, this is time for you to rest. This is time for you to grieve. This is time for you to experience sadness because you had all this amazing joy. And if you don't experience the sadness, you can't experience the joy. So I really appreciate that, and I want to get into kind of the nature of that a little later on. But first, I'd love to start with your story. You have a really extraordinary story from growing up listening to Anthony Robbins with your dad, and like all of the things that befell you and how you coped with that, and to essentially what led you to what you're doing today. So if you could give us the juice on that whole deal, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll try to give you the snapshot version of how I ended up doing what I'm doing today and how I got into grief and nervous system work, because grief work is messy. It's not like, I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, I just want to go into grief work because it's so exciting." It's quite the
Right.
opposite.
It's not very
And
sexy.
it's not. It's not at
Here's
all.
some tissues. You're going to be crying a lot.
Especially with men, right? I did men's work for
Oh,
a decade
yeah.
around grief, and men are taught to run, and that you're weak if
Mhm.
if you show grief and show any emotion. So yeah, I'd say a lot of my story. I grew up an athlete. I grew up the traditional guy's guy that put it in the box, go handle things, military, athletics, performance, peak performance, and had a lot of death and worked fine. Just put it in a box and charged on, and everything worked great. And it wasn't until my brother came to see me in 2007 and said, "Hey, man, things have gotten pretty heavy. I'm shooting needles. I've got an addiction. If I don't come live with you, I'm going to die if I go back to Reno." I was living in Manhattan Beach at the time. And I just started a startup company. I had computers all over my living room. I was an enabler. I didn't know how. He was an alcoholic and now a drug addict. And I didn't know how to take care of him. And I said no. And 3 days later, he went back to Reno and died of a heroin overdose. And that's really what I think spawned my whole journey. And I found out. I cried when I first found out, and then did what I'd always done: put it in a box, flew back to Reno, led the service, took care of my parents, came back, kept it in a nice little sealed off box, and started to build my startup. We got into 100 plus K months, 150K months, wherever we were at, thinking that we were winning. And then 2008 hit. We didn't know it was 2008 hitting at the time because we were in a conscious community selling products around the conscious community. And so we were like, something's happening to the business. We thought it was more spiritual. We moved the business to Sedona instead of being on the ocean because we thought tidal waves were going to hit us. We thought we were
Hmm.
going to get wiped out or something. And the business started to implode. And when it started to implode, my business partner and I were having some conflict. And I came home one day to find him and my girlfriend had decided to create their own relationship while her and I were still together.
What a nice way to put it.
Yeah. It's a nice cleaned out version now that I'm clean with it, but wasn't very nice at the time. And got really upset, did a lot of yelling, said, I'm going to go clear my head for a weekend. And when I came back, they had picked up, taken the business and moved to Mexico. And so one moment I lost the business, which I'd funded on credit cards and never paid myself back. So I learned that lesson through bankruptcy. I lost my business. I lost my business partner, who was also my best friend of 2 years living together, and my girlfriend. And to make it a little bit worse, some buddies at that time were like, hey, dude, let me get your mind off things, come to Tahoe. And somehow I ended up in jail. And it was one of those things where sitting at the low of the low in jail, I was like, I chose all this instead of my brother. And that led me on my hero's journey. And so,
Wow. A clink for, if you don't mind me asking.
yeah, actually, I had a good buddy whose girlfriend had said, hey, can you get me some cocaine? I hadn't done any of that in a long I said, I used to live here. I'm sure I could find you some. And then and I don't even know why she was asking me. Like, it's funny going back and thinking of how things worked. And so I gave her some, did a little with her, because back then I did, and put it in my pocket, went out to use the restroom, came back in, they searched me, pulled it out, which in Tahoe is like a federal offense. So
Wow.
luckily I had that all
Really?
removed off my record, but I was sitting in jail for cocaine, which is like serious offense when I was my low of my low of my low. I literally felt like I was naked on the
Hmm.
ground getting kicked. I am literally in my jail cell. I was just meditating because I was like, I'm so raw. I don't know what to do. I can just go internal and just be in this because I don't want to be in the external world. So it was a really
Yeah.
kind of low moment in my life
Fully a
and
dark night of the soul there.
super dark night of the soul. But as an achiever at that time, my idea of resilience was just how quick can you get back out there? I
Hmm.
had no awareness of emotional resilience. My emotional resilience was how far can you shove it down and how quickly can you get back to life? So
That's
that's what
good
I
for
did.
you. It's better to just shove it all down. Pretend it's
Shove it all
not
down.
there and fucking take some pills. That's
Yeah,
what we should do. That's what we're
exactly.
doing. That's what we
Exactly.
do.
Exactly. Shove it down, shove it down, shove it down until, the system just shuts down.
Hmm.
So I went to go at the time, I was like, who's the best in the world? We were in a personal development company. I believed it was Tony Robbins, which I still have a lot of respect for. So I became a speaker and trainer with Tony and started traveling the world at my low of my low, inspiring everybody else to be at their high of their high. I
Hmm.
used all of his strategies around mindset tools to change my state, to change my body language, and thought I fixed it. I am whole. I've healed myself. And
Da-da-da.
right, which is most of personal development. Oh, you're not broken, you're whole.
Yeah.
Let's fix you. And so I used the tools to fix me. And being that I'd been all fixed and had this new mission, the grief and loss space kept showing up in my space. And so when I left Tony to say, I have a bigger mission to serve. I think I'm supposed to be in the grief space.
Hmm.
And I jumped online and went through some grief forums, picked two really challenging cases. And like, I got the tools to help you. And I failed miserably.
Hmm.
And something like grief is so sensitive that I couldn't just fumble my way through figuring it out. And I really was sitting there going, I thought I knew the tools to fix this. Maybe I don't. How do I go learn some tools to help them? Because I'm fixed. They need help. How do I fix them?
Yeah.
And
Do I ask like
yeah,
just a real quick specific, like, was there some time somebody came to you and they were like, I had this deep loss of my mother, and then you were like, well, what you do need to do is this, then they were just like, what are you talking about? Was there something? I don't know if any example comes to mind like that.
around people showing up in the grief space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I continued to I mean, I would do after my brother died, I continued to do forgiveness ceremonies every year, even at Burning Man. We ran a Burning Man camp for 12 years dedicated to my brother. And in the moment in the playa, when everybody's out running around having fun, I would go to the temple and take my brother's ashes and walk people through a grief experience to forgive themselves for the things they're holding on to and accept that we're going back to ashes. And so I was very much around the grief and loss space. And I even had 3 years after my brother died where I went completely sober after all that because he died of an addiction. And I partied, but I could do it in moderation. And after that, I went totally sober from everything. And that's when I quit actually my ceremonies and doing Aya and doing everything. It was like everything was a no. And I went and I would just go out there and help people that were grieving. So I was really called to, I think I was in so much grief unconsciously, but the way I dealt with it was by trying to help everyone else heal their grief.
Okay.
So that's why it kept showing up. I think it was showing up to help me basically go deeper into the grief space so I could be with my grief.
And what were the tools that, like you said, you went into that space more? Obviously, I mean, I'm totally moved by this forgiveness ceremony out at Burning Man. That sounds amazing. I want to go. If you're still doing it or whatever, I'll go anyway. Um, but um, but you also, so you were doing things that were obviously really, they were effective. But then you mentioned that there were tools that you had when you started to approach people in the grief community that failed. I was wondering, like, I guess what I'm asking is, do you have an example of like one of those where it just didn't work, where you were trying to get them
Yeah.
to?
Yeah. I'll give you an example. So, a lot of personal development, like let's say Tony Robbins' work, beautiful work. His work's on mindset, let's call it. So, what's the meaning I have? How do I change this meaning? So, if I have a meaning, I'm focusing on a meaning that doesn't serve me, my body language, my physiology is going to act a certain way. And then I'm going to get used to that habitual pattern. So, language, focus, physiology, and meaning. So, I had, when I originally reached out to the grief forum, there was two people that had the same symptoms. So it was a man who had gone through a breakup, and his symptoms that he was sharing and emoting from, I was like, okay, I can see his symptoms. And then there was a woman, horrific story. Her husband had come home, found their daughter hanging upstairs, couldn't save her, was so distraught. He walked in the garage and took a shotgun to his head. So pretty graphic story. She came home and found them both, and she would have ended her life, but she had another daughter. And so she had to live for her daughter. Her symptoms were the same as the guy that had a breakup. So those are the two cases that I'm like, I'll help you with the tools. I'll help you fix your grief. And I'd say the fundamental problem is I thought grief could be fixed because I thought I'd fixed my grief. I was going in to fix their grief.
Oh
Grief
wow,
grief can't be fixed.
no.
So me coming in with, I'll help you fix it. That's where I was met with like, fuck you energy. Like, this, like, you can't fix this. How
Mhm.
dare you think you can fix it? It's why now I have a frame. I've had people come up to me and says, I'll fix grief in an hour, like NLP. And I'm like, we just don't share the same philosophy, because I have a very different philosophy now. But then I believed I could. And that's when I realized I failed, but I couldn't see yet why I failed, because I was
Mhm.
still in the mindset that everything can be fixed
Yeah.
as an achiever, right? You're like, where's the solution? How do I fix it? So does that give you a little bit more clarity around that?
No, it's really great. Yeah, now I completely understand. It's also, it shines a light on the reality about grief, which is that it's those kind of wounds like you don't really ever get over. I mean, you can express the sadness to an extent where you're able to like let go and like move forward, but it's always going to come back. And then when it comes back, you have to honor that it's come back. Like there's no getting rid of it. I feel like those kind of wounds are what define us, for better and worse.
Yeah, I have a phrase that I say, which is the grief sculpts our souls and crafts our characters.
Mm.
And they're the forced growth, that deep heartbreak. Grief is the natural response to loss. And it's when your heart's shattered. You love so deeply, and then your heart's shattered. And repair in that is learning to love the grief, learning to accept the grief, you don't have to accept what happened, but accept that there's a big hole in your heart. And the irony is, in the acceptance, that's actually what brings you a lot more compassionate and more self-loving. And for my lens now, let's say you have this big heart and the grief happens to shatter it. What ends up happening is you don't fix the heart. Your heart just grows bigger because you learn to love through the heart. And so that grief can still be there, but your heart expands around it. And that's kind of how I look at it now. It's learning to love the grief. It's learning to accept the grief. It's learning to be there with the grief. But if you have a fix it mindset, that's not going to work. And it's actually what creates a lot of trauma now in the grief space, is people trying to fix other people's grief because they haven't yet accepted their grief that they can't fix. And so we try to, it makes us uncomfortable. So we want everybody else to feel better. Back to our earlier metaphor. I want it to be sunny. The
Mhm.
moon's out. I don't like the moon out. So I'm going to find a reason to fix this, to have the sun come out again, versus accepting, the moon's here.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there in the beginning of the moon cycle. The moon just came out and it's dark, pitch black. And I don't know how long I'm going to be here for. Right. It's like
Mhm.
learning to really accept that and be with that is really hard, especially
Yeah.
when we've been conditioned. It's not okay to be vulnerable, or it's not okay to have emotion. There's not a lot of support. There's a little bit more now, but there wasn't, especially 20 years ago, around the grief space.
Mhm.
So that's where I kind of kicked off. So I went and said, "Hey, maybe I don't know what's happening with grief." Like super humble acceptance. So I did what any sane person would do and grabbed cameras and hired camera crew and started a documentary to understand grief. And any achiever would do to
Yeah.
help them fix their grief because I was all healed, right?
Right. That's great.
And along the way, the first couple of interviews I did, I was doing an interview with a man named Ken Druck, who's one of my mentors, and he'd been in the grief field for over 20 years. And he'd lost his daughter tragically, is what got him into the grief space. And he said this quote during the interview. A lot of things he said, but one thing that really stuck with me is he's like, it's accepting the brokenness versus most of my training had been we're not broken, we're whole. So almost
Hmm.
like this aversion to being broken. And his is actually in the acceptance that we're broken and whole, that acceptance of heartbroken. Yeah, I can accept my heart is broken and I'm still whole, but I have heartbreak. And that acceptance creates more spaciousness to be in the heartbreak. And so he said it with such compassion, but such truth that it like pierced my heart, and it forced me to go into this season of recognizing, oh man, I have so much grief I haven't dealt with. It's like all the boxes I'd been piling up of all my past grief, all the lids got popped open, and I was sitting there in all the grief going like, oh, this isn't gone. I've just tucked them away, and now I'm forced to deal with it. And so through the series of interviews I did, it started first with the more theoretical, creating safety and acceptance. And then I moved into more of the somatics because I'd been trying to think my way through it. And I realized I needed to feel my way through it. And once I learned a lot more somatics, I started to put myself back together again. And then I actually started to get to a place of peace,
Mm.
doing the opposite. Like I hope my whole thing was, let me achieve more, let me make more, let me have a better body, let me have some external thing would make me feel better, which left me fleeted. Instead of going in and learning to be with and feel those parts that I hadn't addressed, actually brought the peace that I'd been seeking.
Mm.
And that's when I was like, okay, there's something here very different than I've learned in personal development. How do I create programs around this? And that's when I first chose to work with men. And so I set out to do that. And I did a decade of helping men, essentially creating really safe environments to reframe grief and loss as a source of power
Hmm.
and a source of aliveness that we can reaccess. And then doing hands on men's work where we basically put hands on and it removes the places the body's carrying the grief and then it just offloads. And
Mm.
so doing that over and over again for a decade, I learned a ton from that process. And it built a lot of compassion and awareness and healing for our journey of where we start. And then you get to come back down to the little boy. Most of it's from childhood, unexpressed grief and trauma.
Hmm.
And then you get to see the integration pieces when we get to feel those parts that have been unexpressed. And so that led me into helping first responders, doing fire, police, and military, because I had a lot of first responders come into my workshops. And so I still train fire, police, and military on tools to navigate the grief and trauma they deal with.
Hmm.
And then more recently, after doing men for a decade, I started to realize I've been around grief for a long time, grief and trauma, nervous system. Well, the grief is where it started. But then to your point you made earlier, I was like, oh, I moved the grief. What's still here? Why is there something still here? That's what led me to the nervous system going like, oh, the unprocessed, let's call it past traumas trigger the nervous system into a reaction that affects us on a day-to-day basis. So if we learn to manage the nervous system, we can actually get in to face the grief almost like the pressure relief valve. But if
Hmm.
we don't have awareness of the nervous system, we're just in reaction all day, protecting ourselves from the grief. So the grief led me to the nervous system. And once I worked with both of those for a while, I just got a little, I felt inspired to work on love versus grief and trauma. And so that's where I've shifted to more recently, where helping men and women really heal their hearts. Because what I found is the men that would come after they did a lot of deep grief work, they realized they healed more of the relationship with themselves and they could be more of their authentic self.
Hmm.
And when they could be more their authentic self, it showed up directly in intimate relationships, being like, oh, let me express the truth of my heart now. And either this is in alignment and now I can deepen with you, or I've been putting on a mask and this isn't in alignment. And how do I uncouple? Because I've been trying to make something work that's not my authentic truth. And so it started to naturally bring people into authentic relating. And so I did a lot of couples work. And then now that's really led me to more like a lot more relationship work because it's beautiful to help people find healthy partners and heal their relationships with their partners. Because love, I think, is something so beautiful of sharing the human experience. And so it's kind of where I'm at now. Does that give you a little bit of
Beautiful.
context and catch you up
That's
to?
loads of context. I'm all contexted up. I'm very contexted. I'm contextualized. The whole thing. Yeah, that's really great. It's really fascinating, your whole journey. Especially, I mean, a couple things came up for me there. One, I'm really sorry about your brother.
Mm, thank you.
What was his name?
Jeffrey.
Oh, Jeffrey. That's my
Hmm.
name
I
too.
know. Hmm.
Miss you, Jeff.
Hmm.
Um, and if you want to take the axes and the sword down to the guy, we could just carve up like a tree in that front yard. You know what I mean? We don't have to do anything other than that.
Leave him a little present.
Yeah. Check out our Edward Scissorhands impression, assholes. Uh, and then the grief thing, the stuffing it down in these compartments, we convince ourselves that it's not there, but really, like, we're just constantly, it's like this ever present twitch, like, no, everything's fine now, no, it's fine, no, it's fine, no, what do I do now, let me take a pill, or have a drink or whatever, like, until the whole house falls down. Um and you mentioned the fix it thing, which obviously I can relate to, because I am a man. So I'm, there's a natural proclivity to try and fix everything at all costs, and
Hmm.
it's been a really long journey, and I'm still learning how to just, like, be there,
Hmm.
particularly with my wife,
Hmm.
when she's, or with myself even. If
Hmm.
I'm sad, I like just saying, I'm really sad right now. That's why I want to go be in bed for a minute. I don't know why. Sometimes I know why, sometimes I don't know why. Just allowing myself that space, and with her just being like, okay, it's okay that you're sad right now. What do you need? Or, like, how can I show up for you, hold you, in that, in your grief and your pain, which works so much better. If I try to fix her, it's a fight. We're getting in a fight, and it's a dumb fight, and that's it. We're off to the races. But if I just am there for her, that's really effective, and I'm still learning.
Well, I think you described the nail on the head. That's what most, from my lens, that's our core root problem of all the problems is we have unprocessed grief stuck in our body that we learned. I mean, if you study codependency is our parents were emotionally immature, which meant they didn't deal with their grief. And so
Hmm.
they passed it on to us. And emotional immaturity and codependency looks like, oh, that's not okay what you're doing. I want you different for me so I feel better. So the ways that our parents essentially aren't able to give us the needs that we need as a child because of their emotional immaturity from the pain they haven't processed forces us not to deal with our pain. And so there's this, like, that's what they call the lineage, like, that keeps getting passed on, is it's the ways that we're avoiding dealing with the pain. And then the way it shows up in the family system is there's usually a hero child and a scapegoat child. The hero is the one that solves all the family problems, and the scapegoat takes all the shame and the anger and the debris of the family unit, which is the outcast. And so it's really built into our society of just not knowing how to deal with our pain. And so the ultimate work is learning how to be with our pain. And when we can be with ourselves and our pain, it's a lot easier to be with everyone else, because we're not trying to, back to what we said earlier, we're not trying to fix it.
Hmm.
Because if they're in their pain and we haven't dealt with our pain, it's triggering our pain that's unprocessed, and we're trying to fix our pain by wanting them to be different. The more we're not trying to fix our pain, we're just going, I'm feeling pain right now and I can be with that pain. The more we can do that with others and be like, oh, you're in your pain, because there's nothing to fix. Back to there is
Yeah.
no fix for heartbreak. There's just, I don't want to be alone in this. Can you be
Hmm.
with me in my grief?
Yeah.
Can you stand with me? Can you love on me? Can you hold me? Can you be there with me? The more we can do with us, the more we can do it in our relationships. But it is
Yeah.
really challenging to practice because it forces us to address our own grief.
Hmm. Definitely. Yeah. It's about, if you create that field of acceptance with somebody, then they feel it, and you're giving them permission to cry and heal and offload that pain. And, like you said, I also don't think that you can fully heal grief. But you can release a lot of it, and you can move beyond it, and you can acknowledge the existence, and it can bother you a lot less, especially if you're trying to deal with it immediately head on, like the baby that cries when it gets hurt, then they're processing the emotion, and then all of a sudden they're not crying anymore. Well, they're not hanging on to the fact that their teeth hurt. They let that go. I know when my father died, Missy Papa, uh, March 8th, 2023, he pretty shortly after that, I drink ayahuasca occasionally, not for everyone. if you call to it, let me know. But it's been really powerful work for me. And I went to a ceremony, and one of the people who was leading it, my friend Jade, was like, "Look, whatever you need, in this moment, we're here for you. Just know that this is a safe space for you to be with your grief." And man, I cried the whole weekend. And it was so cathartic for me to do that, for me to have the space, to create the space. I don't have to show up for anybody. This is a medicine journey. That the medicine itself was helpful in a lot of ways in that regard. And it's not that I don't miss my dad anymore. I definitely miss my dad, and I think about him often, and I think about the pain of not having him here, and it hurts. It hurts just as bad as it did then. And um, because I've recognized it and moved through it, it's not something that's like haunting me, which I think is something that you're pointing to. I feel like people are just we're just walking around wounded all the time, and then now they're prescribing Xanax or whatever antidepressants if you have grief, which is like so stupid. No, just have the grief, like accept the sadness. That's the only way to get through it. I mean, I'm convinced that even if you take all those pills and then you get to a place where you die or whatever, you're like, oh, well, here's all this unprocessed grief that you took that pharmaceutical for. I can't prove that, but that resonates for me. Versus like being in a culture where it's encouraged to grieve, which that's not that far off. Our ancestors were doing that. Tribal people do that. Different countries do that. Have grief rituals. Dios de las Muertas. I am saying this wrong, but you know what I'm talking about. Is the Day of the Dead for the Mexicans, okay? Spanish, I believe too. So, like, there are rituals for that. Because we live in this fix it society, everybody's trying to fix it, get rid of it, stuff it down. That's a real thing instead of like really dealing with it. And I think it's beautiful that what you're doing, your work, is really highlighting grief and accepting grief and moving through that, and that's part of your journey. So, thank you for doing that work. And on that note, I'd love to hear some of the tools that you have learned that are effective for people to move through grief. Give us some pointers for those of us who are crying about stuff or need to cry about stuff rather.
Yeah, well, I think it could broaden it a little bit first. A lot of people think about Greg. Well, before I do, what was your dad's name?
Greg,
Greg. I just want to honor Greg for a moment. So thank you for sharing that, and sorry for your loss.
thank you. Yeah.
But I'd like to broaden it. A lot of people, when they think about grief, they typically think of the loss of the loved one, and I want to broaden grief to change. Like if we think of what change is, we're falling in love with so much, right? So think of like, what do we fall in love with? We fall in love with our age, our body. We fall in love with fantasies and visions. Oh, I'm going to be this millionaire. I'm going to go on this trip, or I'm going to have a family, or this is the way my life's going to look. And we romanticize these fantasies. And then life doesn't equate always to what we fantasize about or dream about. And so grief can look a lot of ways. And most people are not identifying that they're grieving change. Change is the shifting and change of the one thing constant is change. And it
Mm-hmm.
happens constantly. And the way we move through cycles is through grief. That's how we continue. That's when I said the contraction. Contraction is like a cycle we're moving through. Like the farthest expanse of the universe is just contraction, expansion. And I believe it's the same thing we go through every time we move through the cycle of change. And so
Yeah.
if
It's almost like you're
somebody's
squeezing out the tears in that moment.
that's what it is. It's like the body's
Mm-hmm.
contracting. When it contracts, the diaphragm is releasing, and the diaphragm is releasing stuck energy in the body. And that's what it does. Is it's the body's naturally trying to come back to homeostasis. It's us that suppress it and push it down and internalize it in our head
Mm-hmm.
and ruminate and stay stuck in what's happening instead of actually just allowing the natural process. So it's an unwinding, and it's really hard to practice that unwinding experience. And so if we frame it like that, anybody that's listening, they may have gone through a financial loss. They may have gone through a breakup. They may have gone through a divorce that it's been affecting them and not allowing them to move forward from it. Could have just been, I thought I'd be in a different place in my life right now than I am. I dreamed I'd be in a family and two kids and XYZ, and they're not. Like it could be so I just want to broaden that I see it as day-to-day effectors of things that have probably we've experienced deep grief with that we haven't processed the grief. And then what happens is because we're unconsciously shoving it down and then we're trying to fill the space that we don't want to be with something, Instagram, social media, TV, food, drugs,
Pot.
alcohol, intense experiences, like all the things we want to get out of pain to experience pleasure. We
Right.
stay stuck avoiding feeling the actual grief, and that's what prolongs things. So I wanted to build that in first because I feel like I have to start on the nervous system and then we can get to grief. Because if somebody is dysregulated, they're not going to be able to feel their grief because it's kind of like basically jumping back and forth on hot pads, and you're not able to actually stop to actually feel how are the hot pads getting there in the first place.
Yeah.
Like we're just so busy jumping, we don't stop and go remove the hot pads. But
Hmm.
if I'm just too busy jumping, then I'm just going to keep jumping to avoid feeling the pain. And that's where I see a lot of society. A lot of society is stuck avoiding pain, looking for the quick fix. And
Yeah.
so it keeps us stuck from actually doing the grief work.
We're all stuck in our lizard brain.
Yeah.
It's
Survival.
funny when they say the conspiracy about the lizard people running the world, which I don't know. I want to meet the fucking snake people. That'd be cool. You know what I mean? But there is some absolute truth to that, in that a lot of people that are running things in different places, and just a lot of people in the world in general, we're stuck in our lizard brain, or we're getting hijacked by our amygdala to stay in there
Mhm.
and be in there and constantly, but we're smiling, we're smiling when underneath it we're like, what the fuck? Ow, what are we doing? And so those are the hot pads that you speak of.
Mhm.
So yeah, let's get into that. Let's give us some keys to. I've heard some of them, but because I did research on you, Joshua. So if you forget any, I'm going to call you out on it. All right.
Perfect. Perfect.
Uh,
Fill
but
in any of the blanks.
but yeah, let's get into some of that. Like, how do we regulate? First of all, how important is it for us to regulate our nervous system, and then how do we do it?
Yeah. So the frame I like to use is, has there ever been a time when you're like, don't do X, don't eat the food, don't yell at my spouse, don't do that bad behavior that always gets me in trouble, don't blow everything up, like whatever it is, don't spend the money, where that we set a boundary for ourselves, don't do X, and then in a moment when we're emotional, we do the thing that we didn't want to do. But if anybody can ever relate to that, that's an example of the nervous system. And when
For
we get
sure. And the
dysregulated,
second that you try to do that, you try to create that discipline, like those parts of yourself are like, I'm not going to do, I'm going to watch the porn, or I'm going to do the drugs, or whatever it is, the things that.
yeah, well, we just do it because we're in reaction. Or
Yeah.
why do we
And
get
then we
into,
feel bad.
yeah, then we feel shame because they're like, I said I wasn't going to do it. Now I did it. What is going on? Or the fight around the dishes. Like, like sometimes we get in a fight around the dishes. It's never about the dishes.
Right.
There's something else much bigger going on, but those can turn into really bad fights over something simple. So for me, the nervous system is what you did beautifully described as the lizard brain. It's a survival. It's built for survival. So when the body is unsafe and some sort of trauma event is kicked up, from my perspective, trauma is the body's reaction to either a real or perceived threat. So real or perceived threat to our physical or our emotional well-being. How many experiences has our body interpreted as a threat to our physical or emotional well-being? To me, in the lens I look through, those are all traumatic experiences that are constantly tripping us up, all the way back to being in the womb, right? So,
Yeah.
so like before we're pre-verbal, before we have thoughts. So trying to figure these out for me versus just learning to identify when the body's in a reactionary state is where you can have mastery over the nervous system. And so when the body trips up, something's unsafe, it throws us from the front of the brain, which is compassion, empathy, rational thinking, to the back of the brain, which is reaction, which is fight, flight, freeze, appease, are the most common ones people identify as. But the key is low emotional capacity, rigidness, non flexibility. And really, you're not using rational thought. There's binary thinking because your
Hmm.
body's in a survival state. Um, the easiest way to know is reaction. Where did I react without conscious thought?
It's also aligned with righteousness too, I find.
Yeah, it could be
You really want to
being
be
right.
right at all costs in that state, and really it doesn't matter what somebody else is telling you. You're right about it, even if you're totally wrong about it. I don't know how many conversations I've had with my wife where I'm like, later she describes what she's saying, and I'm like, I totally misunderstood you. I thought you were saying this, and I was really trying to be right about that, and I couldn't see any other way.
Well, because we're unconscious. We're not in our conscious, rational brains with compassion,
Right.
empathy, empathizing for your experience, Maya, compassion for myself, and rational thinking. What else can this mean? I'm in the back of the brain is like, I'm under threat. fight or fight or flight, freeze or appease. And I'm literally thinking binary. So it's literally rigid black and white thinking, which is trying to move everything into a threat versus thinking what else we can't think what else can this be? Because from a survival perspective, it's about staying alive. It's not about solving it. My body thinks it's going to die. So first is being able to recognize that. And the metaphor I use is imagine you're a vehicle. You can pick whatever vehicle you want. Let's say you're a Lamborghini. Let's say whatever
I'm a
car you want to
Ferrari.
be.
All
Okay,
right, just
Ferrari.
so everyone knows,
Great. So you're a
I've always
Ferrari. I'll
been a
be a
Ferrari.
Lamborghini.
Sweet.
And imagine you're starting your
And the
day.
Tesla just beat us both.
I know, right? Imagine you're starting your day with like less than a quarter tank. And that's what I'm going to use as emotional capacity. So we are starting off with so much stress. We're starting the day with like a quarter tank. And let's say you have to drive a long distance and you're going to be redlining. Think of the more you have to take on is the farther distance and the more emotional capacity you need. And
Mhm.
so imagine if you're just driving and what happens when you run out of gas?
You got to pull the car over. That's it. Calling the tow
Pull the
truck,
car over.
AAA. It's a
Yeah, it's a
night. Everybody's sad and upset. Now you're late. Creates a whole shame spiral. Yeah.
so,
Why the fuck didn't I know that the gas was going to run out? Yeah, the whole thing. I'm
right.
stupid. Lots of stories.
So
Yeah.
does it sound similar to when we get in a stupid fight and then we come to later going, how did that dumb little fight and this whole thing happen and it took a day, a week, all this time and energy drained us just because we ran out of gas? So it's a very similar thing. So if we can learn
Excellent
to
analogy. Yeah.
identify the gauges when the gas gauge pops up as the trauma, I call it a trauma sign. I need to go get gas. I need to stop what I'm doing, get off the freeway, go get gas so that I can keep driving the distance so I have more capacity. If I keep driving, which is when we want to do typically when we see the trauma signs, I'm going to run out of gas and I'm going to blow everything up. So there's a personal responsibility in being able to recognize. And what's happening is low gas means you're in the back of the brain and you're in survival. When you fill up the tank, you're in the front of the brain, which is prefrontal cortex, compassion, empathy, rational thinking. So I'm a big fan of doing it twice a day, doing it in the morning to start your day because you start with the less than a quarter tank. And then during the day, you drove on red line most of the day. And now you
Hmm.
want to come home when you're out of gas and be home with your spouse or be home with yourself and have a good evening. And we wonder why we're excessively eating, numbing on TV, creating fights with our spouses is because we have no emotional capacity. So for me, we need to fill up the tank in the morning and we need to fill up the tank in the evening because we live in so much more stress than we did when it was in tribes. In tribes, like 75% of their time was spent playing, dancing, procreating, having fun, and only 25% was spent fighting for their territory, getting prey, protecting the space. It was mostly spent in community having fun.
Hmm.
And now we live in so much stress
I
where
haven't heard that before. That's amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's more than flipped where I'd say less than even 25% of the time we're having fun. Oftentimes people are bragging about how busy their weeks are and we may have what 15% of our time where we're actually relaxed having fun. I would say a lot of the time we think we're relaxed, we're dysregulated trying to cope and deal with the
Right.
dysregulation, which isn't actually relaxation. So
That's
so
true.
so
Where
just
when
trying
we
to
think
build
we're having fun, we're not even having fun, or we're drinking, which fucks everything up. As far as I'm concerned. I mean, I
exactly.
don't know. Maybe it's
Let me
okay
let
every
off
once
some
in a while.
steam, right?
Yeah, right.
So
Pretend I'm not grieving. Yeah,
and so there's no judgment on any of this. It's just bringing awareness to the
for sure.
conversation of like, oh, this might
I
be what
speak
I'm.
for myself on the drinking thing, not for anyone else. I'm sure you guys use it very successfully to get through your problems, and God bless you. Everyone knows it works. Moderation, moderation. Okay, let's move
Moderation,
on.
moderation. But it's for me, it's a big advocate of I have to be able to fill up my tank so that I can identify what's happening with the vehicle. For me, the
Yeah.
oil gauge is the gauge of like where I may have to transmute some grief. And so what happens if we don't change the
Okay.
oil, it gets thick and black, right? So if you just keep running your vehicle and you don't change the oil, it's like a black tar. And if you don't change your oil, your engine's going to eventually seize. And so what do we
Yes.
do is we have to drain the oil and put a new golden fresh oil into the vehicle. And so those are practices to move the grief through your body of recognizing when I've taken on emotional load that's clogging the vehicle and I need to actually transmute that energy and move it through my body, which are using practices. I'm a big fan of somatic practices to move that energy through your body because the body wants to bring your body back to homeostasis. And most all of those are going to be using the diaphragm. because the diaphragm moving, if you think about when you cry, your body's moving up and down. That's often where it's releasing the energy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's in the
Hmm.
center column. So grief is in the center column from like your throat to like below your belly button. And that's kind of where it's all stored. So the diaphragm is kind of shaking up that energy and moving that energy out. So big couple key strategies. I teach 5 primary ways to regulate the nervous system. One is 4-6 breathing.
4-6 breathing.
Yep. Number one is 4-6 breathing. The key there is just longer exhales than inhales.
Hmm.
And you have to do it for how long do you think? How long do you
I'm
think you'd
gonna.
have to do four
I
six
know the
breathing?
answer to this question. At
Okay,
least 6 minutes.
there you go. Nice. A plus.
Yeah. Thank you.
Gold star.
Yes.
Gold star.
Yes. I'm the best. Just kidding. Go on.
So,
Okay.
so yeah,
So 4-6 breathing.
4-6 breathing for 6 minutes. You can do variations, but that's the easiest one that people remember.
Yeah.
The second one is physical contact. So physical contact would be co-regulating with someone else or
Hmm.
something else that is already regulated. So that's why equestrian therapy works. That's
Okay.
why service dogs work. And so it can
Does
be,
this apply to like big long hugs with your
yeah,
partner?
yeah.
Okay.
Like let's say you have a practice saying, hey, can we come back together and just breathe and hold each other for
Yeah.
a couple of minutes? That's
Hmm.
going to bring you back into co-regulation faster before you address whatever's happening. So you could just, if that could be a practice to pause, co-regulate for 5-10 minutes even. I know it'd feel like a lifetime when you're really activated, but that's going to do more for the relationship than trying to talk about it until you both get to a regulated place. Actually, combining physical contact and breath is the fastest way to get it, but I do find it can be really hard to do because usually when we're dysregulated, we don't feel safe. So you
Right.
may not be able to do it with somebody,
It's
but
hard
that's
to
the
get it
fastest
in
way.
there. Yeah, I have a friend who does a lot of eye gazing technique with his partner when they get, and I haven't tried that with my wife. I've tried it in like men's group type circles sort of things and acting exercises and whatnot. But yeah, that seems like a really great thing to do when we're triggered, just to stop and say, okay, let's eye gaze for 5 minutes,
I
do the four
gaze
six breathing, you
four
know.
six breathing. You can use cold immersion as number 3. Like you can do
Oh
cold
yeah.
plunge, cold shower, ice in the face, even just splashing some cold water can kind of wake you back up for a second. The next is physical exercise, ideally crossing your left and right hemisphere. And then the fifth one is vocal. So chanting, singing, humming, anything to get in the vocal cords. And these are all using the vagus nerve, which is the longest nerve in the body. And if you want, you can tie a couple of them together. It makes it an ideal practice, right? So you're driving home, you could do 4-6 breathing, and on the exhales, move into a hum like, and you
Hmm.
just keep doing that for 6 minutes. You're going to accelerate the process if you combine them. So those are the 5 primary ways. There's a bunch of other ways, arms under your armpits. There's a place right behind your ear that you can press. So like if I'm sitting in a
Hmm.
crowd, I do the opposite of what everybody said is closed body language, like where they say you cross your arms. If I'm just regulated, I'd rather be regulated than care if I'm closed. So I'll put my arms underneath and I'll do 4-6 breathing if I'm in a group environment and I need to ground my body and get regulated. Another one I'll use is a arm under one hand under one arm, and the other one I'll put a finger behind my right ear, and I can be sitting there having a conversation, like looking at somebody, and I'm pressing on this point. It actually kind of hurts a little bit if you press
Oh
the right
yeah.
direction.
Right underneath the earlobe
Yep,
there.
and that's
Uh-huh.
that's a key point to start to rate. It hits right on the vagus nerve, and
Oh.
doing that while you're breathing and listening, you can bring yourself back online. So again, you could be in a conflict with a spouse. Oh wait, I'm dysregulated. Let me stop and just breathe and be pressing on this point, or with a friend, or wherever you see that show up. And
I'm
they're
gonna start doing that.
a little bit easier ways to practice those different pieces to get regulated. But that is regulation. And then I wanted to share one more piece. So ideally, you're doing one or multiple of those practices twice a day to start the day, to end the day. And then the other one is anytime you notice yourself dysregulated. So symptoms could be eating, numbing, feeding the hungry ghost. It could be passive aggressive behavior, anger outburst, numbness, depression. Yeah, like a whole list of things, or your spouse, right? What do we usually do when the spouse is yelling at us? Do we usually say, "Oh, they must be dysregulated"?
No,
No,
no, it's the claws come out, and here we go.
the claws come
Yeah.
out. So,
Hmm.
so the big thing I start to look at is pain, not shame. So instead of shaming ourselves, instead of shaming others, how do we start to see each other through the nervous system lens as we're in pain right now? and we're basically being children.
Mm-hmm.
We're throwing a temper tantrum, we're shutting down, if you look at little kids, we're doing the same thing little kids do because we're trying to protect ourselves, and we're reverting to the boy or the little girl versus the adult because we're emotional. And so if I can see that, so conscious awareness is when I see the trauma signs, that's the gas gauge on the truck coming up to go, you're getting low on fuel. And if you spot it, you got it. So if you see
Mm.
your spouse dysregulated, you don't say you're dysregulated, you need to go regulate. You say, we move into the next one, which is pause, right?
There's something wrong with you, bitch. All right, you need to go fucking meditate.
Yeah. How's that gonna land?
That goes. Christine loves it when I call her bitch. It's great, especially in that context. No, yeah,
Right.
right. You can't. That's true. Yeah, what sometimes works for me is pause. I need to pause, and then I just walk away. Like I'll come back. A friend of mine recently said, "Space trumps connection," which I think is so powerful and accurate in relationship. If I'm triggered, she's triggered. Okay, we're both. None of this is gonna end well. We're still pretty nice, like ultimately, but like there's not a lot of f bombs or anything like that. We're not insulting each other's character um, per se, but yeah, you're right. Okay, so that's great. If you spot it, you got it. If you're feeling that way, if you guys are in an argument, that's the time to just say, hey, let's just do some breathing, or I just need a break. I'm gonna go do some breathing. you know uh I think it would be great if I could encourage her to do it with me.
Ideally, both partners can bring this into the conversation. And the metaphor is CPR. And why do you use CPR? Because I work with a lot of first responders. They use CPR to resuscitate somebody when they're unconscious. So when we're
Oh yeah,
dysregulated, we
okay.
are unconscious. And
Hmm.
so we need CPR so that we can be conscious to know how to react. That's why we get a fight over the dishes. It could be a huge blowout because if we're both unconscious, how are we ever going to solve it if we don't have compassion, empathy, rational thinking? We're not thinking rational, so there's no solution. There's
Right.
only more conflict. So if you see it in yourself or your spouse, we need to use CPR to get ourselves conscious. So the C is conscious awareness, seeing it. The P is you're right on par, pause. And,
Okay,
and I
boom.
find couples need to find a way to create the pause. And that's usually the hard thing, is doing it when you're regulated, to say, hey, how do we call a timeout? You can do it much easier when there's a smaller fire than when there's a bigger fire.
Hmm.
Probably not going to happen when it's a big fire. So small fire wins. And then
Yeah.
the R is regulate. Go take
Hmm.
10, 15 minutes, get regulated, or as long as you need, and then come back to the conversation.
Jump
And
in the cold plunge.
there you
Yeah.
go. And then you're much able to solve it. So nervous system is just making sure I'm present, I'm compassionate with myself, which means I can feel again.
Hmm.
I'm empathetic with somebody else, and I have rational awareness. And with all these, you'll notice you're in the body.
Yeah.
When you're dysregulated, you're in the head,
Hmm.
and we're disconnected. So you can't feel your grief if you're in the head. You're trying to
Right.
think your way into grief.
Yeah. You're trying to ignore it and just be right and get them away from you and stop it. And yeah, it is fight or flight, fight, flight, freeze or appease. I like the appease. I
Mhm.
haven't heard that before. It's got a really nice ring to it. Fight, flight, freeze, or okay, whatever you want. Okay, okay. Like you just lay down, and then later you're like, why did I do that? And then now we're back fighting again with whatever or ourselves.
Yeah, they call it fawn a lot, fawning, but I like appease better because it feels like you're appeasing that person.
And it rhymes with freeze.
That's why I like
Yeah.
it too.
So you get lots of credit here, Josh Wenner. That's copyright. Watch out, guys. That's great. I meditate. Oh, I went on vacation for 2 weeks and I didn't meditate that much because whatever, we were in Switzerland. Then I came back and I started meditating, and I was like, oh, I forgot that this is hard if you're not doing it every day. But now I'm back in the swing of it, and I did a nice long one today. And and it's a movement thing, and I also do some. It's kind of like a qigong bow. I call it the Tao bow. It sort of came to me. It came to me in a vision, Josh Wenner. God smiled and the heavens opened and said, "Do this way." That's not true. Actually, well, what really happened is I was in a Zen class in college, and we did this like sun salutation, and so it's sort of related to that. But then I added things to it, and things came to me to add that felt really good. One of which is doing an om. So I do like 3 ohms during the thing,
Hmm.
like some chanting, and wow, it really like helps me to ground and get rid of energy and like be regulated. And you know, for my work, I do this podcast, and I also am a musician. So writing, being creative, like it's critical for me to be regulated to even approach doing that, and or rather to like be any good at it. I mean, I can play music dysregulated and it'll suck, and you'll be
Mhm.
like, "Wow, that's like for me to really be effective, I have to be in my center, like able to communicate the message, able to be in love, in the message of that." So I really resonate with so much of what you're saying, and so what I'm picking up in part is like it's really important to find these regulatory tools, whether it's the breathing, the chanting, the cold plunge, the I love this armpits thing. Put your hands under your armpits for a while. Like that's nobody notices that, and you look kind of cool, even doing it for a minute. And then the pressure point behind the ear, like just invest in those 6-4 breathing, or the 4-6 breathing,
Of course.
4 in, 6 out.
Mhm.
That's so easy for us to do. And then also what I'm just kind of rehashing, picking up, like where there is grief, allow the grief to exist, allow yourself to cry, whether it's with somebody else or by yourself. Go somewhere that it's comfortable for you to just be with your pain and like let it come up and express, be in the contraction so that new seeds can grow.
Yeah, what I would say with that is there's a couple pieces. Think of the nervous system regulation is like, I can't stress this enough. For me, it's mandatory. Like if somebody's coaching with me, it's mandatory they do 4-6 breathing twice a day. And the reason being is they stop looping. Looping is when somebody has the same reoccurring thing that shows up again and again and again that they're still challenged with.
It's a pattern break.
Well, it's not a pattern break. They have more capacity to solve what they previously have been dysregulated and not being able to solve because they're just low bandwidth. When they
Mm-hmm.
add the bandwidth, more gas in the tank, they naturally show up differently and solve the things they couldn't solve previously. So,
Hmm.
what I found in my coaching, I'm very outcome based. And so, once I added that as a mandatory, they have to do it. And if they didn't, we stopped working together. They started doing it and they started solving their own problems 10x versus bringing the problems that we'd work on each week. It was like the problem stopped. They just started to move much faster. And
Wow.
what I hear from, that's why I'm saying here's the challenge. It's really easy. So it's just as easy to do as not to do. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
it's so hard is it's like, oh, do I have 6 minutes to do this thing? Stack it with something else. Like I love how your morning practice, you stack a number of things together that you just do as a ritual. Stack
Yeah.
it on your drive to work or stack it on a walk you do in the morning. Stack it with something that you consistently do. And here's what I hear from my clients. Once they've done it every day for at least a month, multiple times a day, they're like, I don't notice when I do it. Here's why it's so
Hmm.
challenging. I notice when I don't.
Yes,
And reason being, when
exactly.
you do it, you are different. You have more capacity. You're solving things differently. When you don't, you're back to low bandwidth and you're getting activated and triggered and you're reactive to all these little things that disrupt your day. So
Mm-hmm.
I can't stress that enough. It's really easy, but if you do it, your life will change.
Yeah, it's really I totally feel that. I've been a meditator for I don't know 25, 30 years or something like that. If I'm being honest about it, um, and off and on. But now I'm very regular with the practice, and if I don't do it, yeah, man, it's like that's when I really notice it. I'm like, oh shit, this thing happened that bothered me so much that would not have bothered me nearly as much had I meditated. I would have had the cushion to just be like, okay, well, that happened. I don't have to react to that. I'm good. Like for me, that's what meditation or nervous system regulation does, or exercise does, is it creates a cushion where it's like I just watched Dune 1 and 2 again for the second time because God bless Frank Herbert. It's so good. And the shield, it's like the shield. It's like you're activating your shield so that
Mhm.
when things come at you, you can deal with them better. It just slows everything down. And I think one other thing that I really want to mention is, in the conscious community and whatever, which I think is sort of hilarious all around. It's like we're all just trying to be human and live the best lives that we can. But there's there's an onus on meditation. It's so good for you. You really need to meditate. And then people who are like, I don't want to do that or sit with myself are like, fuck you. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to meditate. And also I think for some actual people, it is a place to stand and be better than other people who don't do that, which is not the case with you. It's not the case with me. But sometimes you see Instagram, like whatever, the person's meditating on the top of a pyramid, and it's like, come on, dude. um, and so like I just want to say, like, when we're talking about these nervous system regulation things, it's not, it's really just being of service to yourself, and there's no like you should do this. It's just like if you do, your life will change, which is what you said. So I just want to kind of pull some of the pomp and circumstance out of it a little bit there.
Yeah, it's like brushing your teeth. If you don't brush your teeth, like, you're going to get periodontal disease and your teeth are going to fall out. It's like these are
Yeah,
just emotional tools for
and
emotional
no one
health.
will kiss you.
Yeah, no one will get you. If this happens, most likely you're going to be living in lizard brain and living a much more stressed, reactive life. So,
Yeah.
so it's just if we haven't had a really nice dinner, we only know what Taco Bell sounds and tastes like.
Mm,
It's the same thing.
gross.
It's the same thing. I call it moving from the survival brain to the thriving brain.
Yeah.
Survival brain, we don't know outside of survival. And thriving brain, once we taste it, life gets to be really good because there's space, there's aliveness, there's and I'm going to point that picture out in a second, but I just want to build that in is like these are just emotional tools, and you're going to have resistance. Meditation is a tool to change the oil, and it's warrior's work.
Yeah.
I'd say meditation is not this like Zen. It is, but it's really challenging to just be there with yourself. And
Hmm.
it's warrior work, but it pays off in a big way because you're transmuting that oil on a daily basis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Ado is my Zen name actually.
Hmm.
Uh, I was a Dharma name that was given to me by a Zen teacher, so I can speak firsthand that Zen is not easy. And what people call Zen, yeah, it's good feng shui, but it's yeah, it's really hard to sit with yourself and your own thoughts and your dysregulation and the shame that you haven't processed and the grief that you haven't processed and all these thoughts and things that are just constantly pulling you in different directions.
Well,
Um,
and I think that's what you now that's where we're getting to is like, okay, what's the point of regulating my nervous system? You might say I started doing this and now I feel more stuff.
right.
Beautiful. That's now
Yeah.
showing what's underneath the hood, because
Yeah.
once we regulate, we slow down. And now it's like, oh my gosh, there's all this stuff that's bubbling up to come out. Let me go back to getting really busy, hiding behind my work. We call it a men's work. Oh, I'm going to go kick the sprinkler. I'm going to
Uh-huh.
go break something to fix so I can be out of the house instead of dealing with what's going on in the house. Right. But it's at some level, I don't want to deal with what's here. I'm going to go create another problem, another solution, another business, another project to go focus on to avoid being with me, is really what we're
Yeah.
doing. And so grief work is learning to regulate the nervous system and then tune into the body to feel like what's going on with me. And oftentimes it's moving energy that's stuck in the body. And
Hmm.
so think of it as a pressure cooker that just builds. And if you ever seen a pressure cooker go off where it can explode, if we don't deal with our suppressed grief, that's when it comes out sideways, usually on
Yeah.
the people we love the most.
Hmm.
And by letting that pressure cooker relieve some air, some steam, we create more spaciousness, which means we have even more capacity. And that's where we really get into living a thriving life, because we're not sitting there reacting to the past so much anymore or living so far into the future. We're really in the moment. The more spaciousness you get on feeling your grief, the more present you get into this moment, because it's taking up energy.
Hmm.
And if we suppress our grief, we also suppress our joy. So when you
Yeah.
excavate some grief, you actually get more access on the joy as well. So your life gets richer and more fuller because you can be in the spaciousness.
Yeah. And the lows become much more low. The sadness becomes much more deep, but you're able to feel it and experience and let it go. So then you can experience profound joy, especially if you're giving yourself permission to do so. One of the things that I'm sure you also talk about, and because I want to talk about love and gratitude, gratitude is such a great key to get out of any of this bullshit. Stopping and thinking how grateful I am to be living the life that I am, how grateful I am for the food in front of me, how grateful I am for the air that I breathe. It's a real key to, I think, also to regulation, because it just has you slow down and get out of this stupid little thing with the garbage disposal that's not working or whatever is going on. You're fighting with your wife about the Terminix guy who came, which is what happened the other day. We were fighting about Terminix guy. Can you believe it?
It's his fault. It's his fault.
Yeah, it really was his fault. Sorry, Randy. No, just kidding. Uh, um, but yeah, gratitude, how valuable that is. And also the gratitude is something that's naturally arising in meditation anyway. Once you like cook down some of the juice, once you, I mean, the bad news that you're pointing to is like you start meditating and regulating yourself. Well, then you're giving the giant turd that's, inside of you, the giant shame grief bubble that you haven't dealt with, that's going to start asserting itself. You're going to start to see it. So then you have to deal with that. But you're also strengthening yourself so that you can deal with it. And there's another side to it, which is once you start to really deal with that, like you're saying, you really open up your capacity to experience more joy and more love in life.
Well, and two things. What I will say is, I'll get to the gratitude in a second. You are dealing with it every day that you don't know.
Yeah.
So often we think, I don't want to go there because I don't want to unlock the monster that I've kept under my bed. Little do you know, you're dealing with it every day, and it's stealing your life away, and it's stealing the capacity you have to live a more fulfilled life because it's taking up space anyway. So when we address it, we're actually just addressing what's already been there, because it's what's blocking us from being in connection with ourselves. Really,
Mm-hmm.
all this work is, which is what meditation is. Can I just be with me without
Yeah.
the distractions, without something I'm focused on in my head, without some future fantasy? Like, can I literally just be there with me? And if there's past grief and there's past stuff that's within us, we really struggle to be there with self. The more we're able to move some of that out of the way, the more space we have to be with us. Our creativity comes back, our aliveness comes back. There's so much energy and aliveness that is stored in unmetabolized grief that we get that back. So for me, it's kind of the opposite. It may seem like things are getting worse, but really what's happening is you're accessing what was already there and
Mm-hmm.
facing it. And most addiction is not wanting to face reality. And so of course it's going to feel uncomfortable at first because we're facing reality, we're facing what's there. But as we do, we get more in integrity, we get more in resolve, we have less nervous system pressure reaction points, which means we're more in integrity. Like, oh, I say it and I follow through. There's not this pressure directing me, overriding my system anymore. I'm a lot more regulated. I have a lot more control over my life. And so there's a lot more freedom. The second piece I would say is one of the practices my mentor taught me was the same one, Ken Druck. He would go on a walk every day. And on the way up the mountain, he gave himself permission to like go into full expression of what he was mad at or angry at. Like that could be a grief practice. I'm just going to walk up the mountain and I'm going to offload and dictate everything, no filter, what everything you're angry about, mad about, upset
I
about
love
yourself,
that.
others,
That's
anything.
great.
And on the
Yeah.
way down the mountain, I'm going to go over everything I'm still grateful for. And so what
Hmm.
it does is it gives both. Where I see people struggle is when they just get stuck in the grief, to your point earlier, or when they just go to the gratitude, but they don't address the grief. There's a bypass to what's actually happening. So finding a space to just create more space for both creates a lot more of like both can exist. I can be in my
Hmm.
pain and I can be in my gratitude, but these can both be here. And I have space for both of them.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Something that we talk about on this program, or that I talk about on this program a lot, is what I call the love operating system. I'm not, there's no trademark or copyright on that. I'm not trying to sell it to anybody. But it's this idea that, I do feel, from my own experience and observations that, we do live in kind of a fear-based operating system. Fear cells. Um, Most of us are secretly afraid, or not so secretly, but mostly secretly. Mostly we're really hiding a lot of shit underneath the eyeballs that we're not admitting to. And then it comes out in relationships or whatever, however it comes out. And if we shift from a fear-based operating system to a love-based operating system, which for me really looks like asking myself a contextual question: how do I love more? Really just thinking, how do I be more loving in this moment? How do I give and receive more love? How do I truly be of service to this person that I'm dealing with now,
Mm.
from a space of really actually being of service, not to get anything or get validated, which is one of the wounds that you talk about in some of your work, which is super important. We can get into, but like for me, having a love operating system, or even just talking about it, because it's not constant, bringing it to mind, thinking, how do I love more? I find super helpful because it opens the door to, for one thing, how do I love more? If I ask that question, then the grief and the sadness that might be in the way of that comes up automatically. And how do I love more might be, how do I love myself more? How do I love myself through this grief? How do I love the grief? How do I love the loss of my innocence, of that I'm not a billionaire by the age that I am now, or that I'm not a world famous actor, musician guy? How do I just love who I am for what I am, being who I am right now? And that's something that you've mentioned, that like that's kind of what your focus is now, is more love based. And I'm just curious, like, what you would want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean that's really the end all to everything, right? Like I love that. Like love is the answer. Love is the answer to getting through grief. Is we unconditionally love the grief.
Yeah.
Like okay, when you're in the throes of it, can I just love this that it may never change? It's actually what brings the most relief to people in like really deep grief, is just saying like I'm with you, and the truth is this may be here for a while. This may never go away. And like that
Hmm.
acceptance versus it's going to get better, you're going to feel better. Like all the things is actually what brings more frustration, and more of like, hey, I'm with you. That's actually what brings deep compassion. And it's part of the human journey. I mean, I did that film I finished. It's called The Gift of Grief. It took me a decade.
Oh, cool. It's out
Um,
now. Where can we watch it?
yeah, it's just giftofgrieffilm.com, but it's literally a
Okay.
documentation that I did of my journey over a decade and my parents. But my brother's room was untouched for a decade. And then she
Wow.
did the dirty clothes. And then at 12 years, she was finally ready to let go of the stuff in his room. Right. So it took me 15 years to go through my process. And we ran our camp for 12 years. So there was like
Hmm.
these things that we just kept carrying, being this might be forever. And then there was a certain point when it just shifted. And we were like, okay, we're in a different space now, and it moved into a different space. But some people that happens right away, some people that happens after a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. It just gives permission for each person to have their own unique experience, because it's based on their love,
Yeah.
and love is the answer. So I'm right with that on your framing around that.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm sure, there are times that you think about Jeffrey and you're just like, oh my God, and I miss that guy so much. With my dad, it's definitely like that. I think about him. I'm like, God, I wish that we could be joking around. We did a lot of that. So, and I talk to him and he talks back to me even now, which is really nice. And I don't care if people think I'm crazy, because I'm not. All right. He's talking to me. I really feel that you can tune into our ancestors that have passed. That's just it doesn't really make any sense to me any other way. You mentioned integrity, and you talked a little bit around men's work, and I've done a lot of men's work, and I'm a huge fan. I think that one of the main things that's missing in the world right now is men's initiation rites,
Mm-hmm.
and going through something that like declares the difference, and has me accept radical responsibility for my life, and has me claim that I am king of my kingdom, the kingdom, the people that are around me, the place in which I live. How do I be of service to those people? That's any good men's work is really, think, is focused on that, and also transitioning from boy to man and making a declaration. Okay, now I'm a man. What does that mean? Well, it means I can't blame other people for my problems. I can't do the trauma triangle thing anymore. I got to really be at the source. I got to be in my center. And then also, you mentioned integrity, which I think is something that's been a hard teacher for me. Also, it's hard to be in integrity. It's hard to do what you say you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
A big distinction that has been super valuable for me that they make at Landmark Education, which I've done a lot of that work, is, it's honoring your word. So if I tell you we're gonna do this podcast at 1 o'clock, and I'm gonna be, but really I'm not gonna be able to make it until 1:10, instead of just letting that slide, I'll text you or call you or send you an email saying, hey, I really need to alter my word here. I'll be there at 1:10. Something came up. I'm sorry. This is the new word that I can stand behind. But people don't usually do that. Usually people just break their word, and then they don't think it's important, and then there's a whole shame cycle that gets created around not honoring your word, and then it feeds into the perpetual wounding that we're experiencing and the grief that we're not dealing with.
It's all tied together, right? Snowball.
it, it is all tied together, and so I just I want to touch on that. I guess the first question is like we can definitely talk about men's work and the importance of that for you and what that's about for you, what the meaning of that is, but then also like how important is integrity?
Yeah. So for a man, how are we trustables if our words and our actions are in alignment? So like that's like if a man is trustable, which is super important for us. If we want respect as a man, then we have to be trustable. And if our words and our actions are not in alignment, then we're not trustable. And for women, it's are they in alignment with the truth of their heart? So it's a little bit different if
Hmm.
they're trustable, which means the feminine could be this moment I'm happy, this moment I'm sad. So actually their connectiveness to that is what makes them trustable. So integrity is a little bit different from my lens for both men and women, because we're wired very different. We're wired for single-minded focus, meaning I'm applying my focus, so I'm going to say and I'm going to do where that focus goes. They're in diffuse awareness where everything is reacting to them, and so it could be shifting moment to moment. But that's the polarity of masculine, feminine balance, and so we have a little bit different pieces. What I've found for me is, and this ties into men's work. Without men's work, I'm on my own island and I'm a lone wolf. With the safe community of men that hold an upset of values, to your point, to make me have greater personal accountability and responsibility so that I show up in the world and also to reflect back. So to also get the nurture needed, like, hey man, I'm with you. I see you, here for you. You're not in it on your own. And also the challenge, you said you were going to do this and you're doing this. What the fuck? Like we need both to be sharpened. And so from that, we have blind spots. So what I've noticed in me is without my men's communities, I was wandering around for years as a lone wolf, not being able to see my own neurosis
Hmm.
and living in a vacuum with no examples of healthy initiated men and then no examples of initiated men around us. So with healthy men around you, initiated men challenging you, you get to see your blind spots, you get to track your nervous system patterns you can't see, and you can get better. So for me, that's what it's come from. I've done a lot of codependency this last year because my men's group sat me down and said, hey, you have some patterns running the show that you need to address.
Hmm.
And here I thought I'd handled this area and I got this area. And I'm like, look, everything's great. And they're like, no, you said you want this, but you're doing this. And I was like, they're right. Where is that? And
Hmm.
when I dug in, I'm like, oh, there's some deeper layers of codependency work, which to me, AKA childhood, which is where it all goes, some childhood work that I need to address, that I need to look under the hood, that I got some blind spots because they're in my subconscious that I need to look at. And since I've started to address them, even though they've been uncomfortable, I noticed my integrity's gone up 1,000-fold, where I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, this was sucking out energy over here because I couldn't see it in myself, but I was saying this and then doing this unconsciously and then making it sound good to think that I was in a better place. The long and the short of it is just to be direct with it, wanting an actual healthy relationship and then finding myself more like exploring open relationships. And I'm not an open relationship guy. And they were like, I'm like, see, while I work on myself, I'm doing intimacy work and I'm still doing the work. And they're like, dude, you said you want a wife and kids. You're not an open relationship, dude. Like, where did you come over here? And then I'd convince myself, oh, I'm practicing intimacy and I'm being transparent and we're practicing all the tools. Why wait for a relationship to come? And they're like, but why would you even engage in this if it's not what you want? And so I was
Hmm.
like, oh, good point. And so it really
Assholes.
forced me, yeah, assholes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Fuck you. Thank you.
She was hot.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But what a gift. It was super confronting. And then I was able to go in and go, okay, I have some deeper work. Where I got to was the trauma with my brother was so big in my life personally that it took me, I did tons of somatic work, but that was to clear the charge with my brother. And now
Hmm.
this last year, I've been doing all this work for childhood. And
Okay.
so it was like, that's why I created a space to go, oh, I'm not going to date. I'm just going to go in and love on the little parts of me and do exactly what we've been talking about on this whole podcast is, can I remove any of my distractions to learn how to just be there and feel the deep grief from childhood, which I hadn't done. I'd done
Yeah.
middle of life grief and trauma, but I hadn't done childhood grief and trauma, which is down further.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting how deep that runs, and that we're all just a bunch of wounded little boys and girls walking
That's it.
around talking to each other,
That's
but
it.
acting like we're adults and we know what's going on when we really just are sad about all the trauma that we
That's it.
experienced.
Everybody's a bunch of little kids, like adults
Hmm.
walking around as emotionally immature little kids, developmentally immature. So coming back to wholeness is literally going back to feel the feelings we didn't feel in childhood, which bring us back to our authentic truth and allow us to remove the masks and the limiting beliefs and the stories that have just lies that we've been telling ourselves to protect
Hmm.
ourselves. And then we really connect to our authentic truth. And that's where I think the authentic, to your comment earlier, the deep integrity comes from. Like
Yeah.
deep integrity is I'm in alignment with my authentic truth.
Hmm.
And when we're saying it and following it in both public and private, that's when our integrity sword of truth is like firepower, right?
Hmm.
You're like, I have a lot of firepower because I'm following my word. I'm in integrity, not just what I tell the word with, telling a friend and meeting to your example, but what am I doing behind closed doors? Like I've heard this phrase, anybody that thinks they've achieved mastery, just ask your wife.
Right.
She'll say,
Yeah.
I'm
She is the
watching you.
final
You say that.
boss.
So will they see the parts that we can't always see with ourselves of where we miss out of integrity that we don't catch, right? So it's like really showing that up, I think, in both external and internal is the work. What about
Hmm.
you? What's your experience around that?
Well, first of all, I definitely notice that if I am looking to just be of integrity and that I'm doing what I say I'm going to do, I'm very guarded with what I give my word to. I won't say that I can do it if I don't think that I can do it, and that I find is extremely empowering. And then I don't get a big shame spiral about not achieving the thing. So okay, so I'm going to tell a little story that's going to tie into being a little boy. Like I did this concert. It was the biggest concert of my life. It was a 500 seat theater, really nice, decked out place. The Center for the Arts here in Grass Valley, beautiful stage. I had an amazing band. We rehearsed for months for this show. It was really good. And when I went to do the show, like I was still grappling with some stuff from childhood around permission. Like just doing the show in and of itself was a huge triumph as in my life as far as like how my parents viewed me and my family viewed me in terms of like being able to be successful as a musician like that, you know, and all of the stigmas that there are in society against that. So it was like a really big deal. And I did kick ass. It was really good, but it wasn't as good as it could have been. And I know that. And you might watch it and be like, no, 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 it's great, you know. But I know that inside there were parts of myself that I wasn't giving myself permission to just be fully expressed, that I was worried that it wasn't good, that I had that thought that, you know, certain things that came up in the show, like there was a haze machine. Well, that made me parched. I wasn't expecting that. So I kept having to drink water. Well, I didn't want to drink water during the show, but now I got to drink water. I couldn't totally hear my bandmates and my inner ear monitors, which I did mention, but like didn't get solved. And so that was always hanging, is this good? And I can't see anybody because there's lights in my face. So there were things that like I ultimately heard all those voices and I was like, okay, I'm just letting that go. But that was like halfway through the show. And so what's interesting is like, first of all, integrity I think is so critical. And also even as I've gone through initiations, so I could call myself an initiated man, although I think it's weird to do that. But technically speaking, I'm an initiated
Yeah.
man. Even with that, my little boy is still there. He's not totally healed. He's still wondering if it's good enough. He's still trying to find validation in some way. I'm just aware of that so that I can at some point more own the show than he does, so that I can rise above that and be of service in the best way that I can, especially with something like performance and music. How do I really embody this song? How do I let go of that voice in my head that's saying it's maybe it's not good, or I have to duck this note because I'm parched, you know, but anyway, it still sounds good. For me, integrity is like critical. And then also just recognizing like, you know, there's no end to this game. You know, there's no, I don't know. I don't have any ideas or delusions that I will ever be quote unquote fully healed. that there's always going to be some grief in the background. There's always going to be something to work on. There's moment to moment, something else is going to come up that's going to be a challenge. And otherwise, why even be alive in the first place if that's not the journey to just learn the lessons?
I love what you're saying, because to me, that's how I see it. I think in the personal development industry, we're often taught, because it's the sales model they use, is here's where you're at. I was here. I use this strategy. Now I'm whole. Do my strategy to get out of the pain to find the solution. What they don't tell you is almost everybody I know in personal development, because that's my whole community, always working through shit. So like
Yeah.
to me, the best models and examples, and that's what we didn't see as our fathers. We saw over rigidity. I got it all figured out. I'm perfect. Or you're not, like some rigidity around that, versus we're all imperfect humans doing our best to make our world the best place we can. We continually have more growth. We're always working on new pieces to become a better human. Doesn't mean we don't have joy and aliveness. Doesn't mean, for me, uninitiated is often where we don't have the humility to admit we're still a work in progress. And I'm with you on that same page. Is it's not that we're not going to get dysregulated or revert to our wounding. It's just we have a lot of awareness. We catch
Yeah.
it quicker, and we have tools to go. Wounded boy showed up again. Okay, I have some self-compassion. I have the
I'm
tools
gonna
to
go
use to
climb the
navigate
mountain,
this.
do
Yeah,
some breathing.
I'm gonna go climb a mountain. I'm gonna take some ownership. I'm gonna let my ego feel bruised for a little bit. I'm gonna humbly apologize, and then I'm gonna course correct and gonna do better next time. Like, it's, to me, those are the leaders I respect now, because the ones that make it sound like they have it all figured out, like they're untouchable, because we're humans and we're gonna make mistakes. And so that's, to me, the best leaders. I was literally having a conversation with somebody the other day going, every top relationship coach I know is struggling at some area in their relationship, which makes it like we're not searching for perfection. So it like removes, we need to look perfect to have it all figured out. And it more says, how do we, back to your point of love, how do we learn to be really loving with ourselves as we move through life? How can we be really forgiving? How can we have a lot of grace? How can we have a lot of self-love for ourselves? And ultimately, the Gottman Institute says 68% of couples determine their success by how loving and nurturing they are with each other's nervous system. So it's really more
Mm.
about, this is all the past trauma. I know it so well. I can articulate my needs and boundaries really well. I can be really compassionate with your needs and boundaries. I can self-soothe myself or regulate myself if I need it. I don't need you to, but I can communicate my needs. And if you're resourced, it would feel really good. And if you're not, I've got this. Like, we're learning to move out of codependency, which is like, I need you to do this for me, which is what our parents did to us.
Hmm.
Codependent on, give me the love because I can't take care of myself. And we're learning to move into sovereignty, which is like, I got me, you got you, to interdependence, which is what would love do. Meaning, I got me, you got you. I can still communicate my needs. And if you're resourced and love would do it, you're happy to give it without needing something back. And if you're not, go take care of you because I got me. And I think that's what we're learning how to do with friendships, with community, because anything less is sacrificing our need for somebody else or wanting them to sacrifice their need for us, which is back into these codependency parts, which we still were going to do and make mistakes and fumble around. Again, that's why it's like it all comes back down to grace and unconditional love and acceptance and forgiveness. And how can we do the best job we can and just have a lot of compassion and self-awareness? And it's like, I remember hearing that phrase, like, the more you learn, the more you realize you know nothing. And so, like how long you been a musician for?
I mean, I started singing when I was 5 years old, so
A couple, like
six
a
years
year or
old.
two.
So yeah,
A couple years. So
yeah,
are you still learning things that blow your mind in music?
totally, absolutely. That's one of the things I love about it. I mean, you can achieve some level of mastery, but really, there's just always way more to learn. Or switch instruments and see what happens.
Which to me is the same thing. That's life. Contraction, expanding, contraction, expansion, contraction, expansion. It's never ending. So we're never going to be quote unquote fully healed. We're never going to be fully there. And for my belief, the attachment to that is actually the source of our suffering, versus I'm going to do the best job I can every day, keep growing, keep learning, but using the tools. To me, the tools now in the world we live in high stress environments. We live in a world, Krishnamurti's quote is, no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Like, we live in a sick society.
No measure of health to be
It,
well adjusted to say it again.
yeah, it is. It's Krishnamurti. It is.
Uh-huh.
It is no measure of health to be profoundly well adjusted to a sick society.
Ah,
So,
yeah.
so we are just well adjusted to a sick society that values vanity, pharmaceuticals,
Cars.
greed, power, money,
Yeah.
status, all this stuff. And we've lost our way in a lot of ways. So finding our ways back to wholeness when it's not the status quo is challenging and hard because you oftentimes feel like the black sheep in a world that's moving towards sickness. And so it
Hmm.
takes a lot of courage to come back to self. And it takes a lot of courage to be authentic in a world that struggles to be authentic. So it's often not it's the off beaten path that brings you joy and aliveness, not trying to keep up with the Joneses and trying to keep what everybody else like. We're just trying to adjust to the society that tells us we're not enough when we're inherently valuable for being a miracle walking the planet just the way we are. And
Hmm.
love tells us that.
Yeah,
Love's like,
definitely.
you're perfect just the way you're, perfectly imperfect just the way you are.
Hmm. There's nothing wrong with you. There never has been. This is all by plan, like it or not.
Yeah, yeah.
And you probably won't like it. I don't like it sometimes. I'm like, this is the plan. This is the plan. Come on with the plan. No, let's change the plan.
It has suffering. It has a lot of like it's life has all of it.
Yeah.
It's this mix, right? Back to your thing of the sun and the moon. It's not just sunny every day.
No, no. And you can't take a pill or snort something to make it sunny again. You can, but it's going to be way darker
It's gonna
after
cost you.
you.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to cost you. It's going to make it more of a new moon, more darkness. Yeah, that's great. Well, I feel super grateful to be in this conversation with you, Joshua. I really admire your work, the work that you do with, and I want to acknowledge you for like being on this journey. You could have, I don't know, done something totally different with your life, and it really occurs to me as though you are someone who is keenly looking to answer the call of what's going to be most of service to you and to other people. And that's a rare and beautiful quality. So I just want to acknowledge you for like
Thank you.
being you. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
being a Jedi.
Thank you. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's to your point on manhood. The boy's currency is validation, the man is service. And
exactly.
so how do we serve ourself, our spouse, our community, our families, our purpose? But the key is without sacrificing self.
Yeah.
And that's where it's a fine line.
Yeah.
And it's
That's where
and
it
it's
gets
been an
chunky.
honor. Thanks so much for having me on here, and so great to meet you and such a fun conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's one question that I ask all of my guests, which is for you, Joshua, what is sacred and what is insane?
What is sacred is my relationship with God. Like that to me is definitely my highest value and sacred. What is insane is compulsion, like our compulsion to get out of pain.
Mm.
Like it is literally like I said, I've been doing codependency work. You stop one compulsion and the other one shows up. It's like whack-a-mole. You're like,
Hmm.
this one's down and this one shows up and this one's down and that one shows up. So like the areas we avoid feeling the pain is insane.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we just piss off the dragon and then it gets bigger.
That's
And
it.
all of a sudden we're
That's
like,
it.
ah,
That's
now
it.
it's burning down our village. And we're like, what? Wait a minute. Give me a drink.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm just
Have
gonna
fun in jail.
avoid this for a little while. I'm gonna go
Yeah,
have some fun. Yeah.
right.
And then it gets
Yeah,
bigger. Oh wait, now I want to avoid it even more. Now it's even bigger.
yeah. It's crazy to me that we have this false myth that we can pretend it away or ignore it away or pill it away or drink it away or smoke it away or whatever it is away, that it's then going to actually go away when it's always just getting worse because we haven't dealt with it.
Mm-hmm.
Takes a man or a woman like an adult to really sit down and face it and grieve.
I'd say it's the hardest work there is.
Yeah.
So if somebody's listening to this and you're on this journey or you're considering this, or if you've been on it for a while and struggling, like just have some compassion. This is definitely the hardest work that there is from my lens. So confronting, so challenging, and yet has so much fruit at the end of it or
So
through
much
it.
freedom.
So
Yeah.
much freedom. So just be gentle with yourself.
Mm-hmm. And me too. And you.
Exactly. Me too. You're not in
Yeah.
alone.
Nice. All right. Thank you so much for coming on the program, Josh. I really appreciate it. It's been really, what a pleasure getting to know you, brother.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been
Look
an
forward
honor.
to meeting in public sometime. Likewise. If you want to support this podcast, go to patreon.com/lunacy podcast. Any support is welcome and appreciated. Much love to all of you. I will see you next time. Sorry it was such a big break. It won't be so in the next iteration. Okay.